Bueno, buenos días.
Good morning. I'm going to talk about a plant which is not an Amazon rainforest plant. It belongs to the old world, but it's becoming more and more related to ayahuasca and with the environment of ayahuasca users. I am referring to Peganum harmala. It belongs to this genus. Actually, all the Peganum species share the same traits as for Peganum harmala. Harmala maybe is more known because it's more widespread in the world, as you can appreciate here in this map that I made myself in blue, indicating the areas in the original basin with presence of P. harmala, the Mediterranean, north of Africa, and about 100 years ago, Peganum disseminated in North America, those areas marked in red, South Africa, Australia, but at least to me, it's yet not clear why it spread to these other places. I'm sure it's because of man, but it's not clear to me if it's because of its medicinal properties, because P. harmala is really medicinal, or maybe because of the effects. They live in arid, semi-arid places, so it's difficult. It's difficult, I think, for it to grow in the Amazon rainforest. However, I think it can. It can grow in South America, in the Caatinga, in the northeast. In Brazil, because the habitat there is quite similar and quite good for this plant. So let's take a look. Let's take a look what P. harmala has to do with ayahuasca. The seeds, actually all the plant, but we use the seeds of the plant. The seeds produce the same alkaloids as in ayahuasca, harmine and harmaline. Actually, the Peganum seeds produce over 50 harmala alkaloids. Harmine, harmaline, this comes from the name Peganum harmala, because for the first time 1800s, those alkaloids were discovered, Peganum harmala, and when we studied the ayahuasca liana, and we isolated telepathin, only then did they realize that the alkaloids were the same that we can find in P. harmala. Concentration-wise, P. harmala concentrates a lot of alkaloids, 10 times more, sometimes 20 times more potent than the ayahuasca liana. That is why in the recent years, P. harmala has entered in the realm of interest among P. harmala users as an eventual replacement for ayahuasca. You see this amount apart from the 10% of harmine and harmaline, which is a lot. That's a huge amount. And this has been found in wild plants here in Spain, in Toledo, in the area of Toledo. Peganum harmala, well, goes back in time, long back in time. Archaeological data tell us that with Peganum, well, at least we go back 7,000 years ago, and we have cuneiform studies, hieroglyphics that say that Peganum symbolically was regarded as a plant of life, a plant that gives life, it provides life. And it's very interesting to see what happened in Egypt, where they call it Bezasa, that means P. harmala, and Bezasa means the plant of Bes, a god in Egypt, a dwarf/lion with good in it, so a very good god protecting the mothers in delivery, women in labor. So we know that there were rooms devoted to Bes in Bes temples, where the sick would go and they would undergo incubation. Incubation at the time was a therapeutical practice spread around all the ancient civilizations in the Mediterranean basin, meaning the sick person would go there, would approach the temple close to God, Asclepius or Bes, I mean in Greece or Bes in Egypt, probably they would take some substance and they would go to sleep, and God would send good healing dreams to the person. And when the sick person would wake up, they would be cured. I don't think it's the case. Harmine and harmaline, this has much to do with dreams, as we know. Claudio Naranjo, in his studies, has defined those alkaloids as being oneirophrenic, oneiro meaning dreams, and that was found in those vessels called vesiacon, meaning vessels or jars of Bes. And with these jars, with jars of Bes, probably that's what they used to take to drink Peganum harmala. I'm not going to review the mechanism of action, pharmacological action of ayahuasca, because you know what it entails, the MTs and the MAO inhibitors that block, that, you know, with these DMT, with this combination, DMT can affect and intoxicate the mind. And this is not only the only mechanism. There is another mechanism. There's more to know. There's a lot of things that we still don't know. But this is generally accepted mechanism of action, and this is called the mechanism of Holmstedt-Lindgren, the two researchers that for the first time established the hypothesis. And then Dennis McKenna and other authors have confirmed the validity of this mechanism of action. In order to understand how Peganum is used nowadays, we take this mechanism as a starting point. And I would like to talk about what I call the ex-Huascas. We have the traditional ayahuascas, and with this new picture, we can consider the mother ex-Huascas, the original one, the one in the rainforest with the chacruna and the leaves plus capi. But there is another category, other categories that were defined by Jonathan Ort, and we can take plants with the same active ingredients and combine them. And then we have what we call ayahuasca analogs, the same leaves, chacruna leaves, for instance. If you combine this with Peganum seeds, not ayahuasca liana, but P. harmala seeds, then we call this chacruna huasca, ocohuasca, etc. This can be taken, I mean, the pure chemical compounds can be taken, DMT in crystal, in harmine or moclobemide, which is a psycho drug, and you can combine this, and then you achieve a pharmahuasca, the pharmacological. But now we have even a wider picture that I call the ex-Huascas, the combination of the X source, a plant or a chemical drug, plus a MAO inhibitor. And these MAO inhibitors are usually P. harmala seeds. It might seem complicated, and I know, and in other situations, our situations are more complicated, believe me. But I'm simplifying this here. It's much more complex than this, especially if we are using all the chemical drugs, all of them combined with P. harmala, and that is the most problematic aspect from a toxicological perspective. But here we are not interested in chemistry, so that's why I'm simplifying possible combinations that we know for sure are being used. I've just use LSD plus P. harmala seeds, Lisahuasca as an example. These these seeds are combined with the chemical drugs, and you can create brews that are taken orally. They are drunk. Then we have the Psilohuasca, the psilocybinic fungi. We know over 150 species of them that are spread around the world, and again we combine them with seeds of Peganum harmala, and you can call also you can mention the peyote and a combination of P harmala with virtually everything. With the globalization of knowledge and globalization of sources, this can be a reality anywhere of the world, but there are some regions. Psilohuasca with fungi, this is widely used in Europe. The acacia huasca, so the bark of ayahuasca, this is more used in Australia because those plants, those acacias, are easy to grow in Australia. In Latin America, 20 years ago or more, we find that there are different cults. The Jurema cult, and the Daime, And where Jurema is used, Mimosa tegniflora and other mimosas, and Daime. And their sects, Lumanda, Lumandai, there are cults that combine Jurema and Daime, and that's Judaime. And 20 years ago, Peganum harmala arrived in Brazil, and it is spreading with its use. Peganum is reaching all world, I think. Apart from France, that I know of, you can find it, no problem, anywhere in the world. And now that Peganum has arrived in Brazil, they are combining it or mixing it with all the intoxicating sources. With Judaime or Jurema plus Peganum, or Mimosa plus Peganum, so Jurem Huasca. Sometimes some people use the brew of ayahuasca, so Chacruna plus Liana, to which they add Peganum. So it's never enough. There's huge experimentation nowadays using P harmala because it's a very, very powerful source in the world. So when we combine this psychoactive X source with Peganum, what is it that happens? The effects of the X source will turn stronger, more visionary. They last longer. In the case of fungi, this lasts for 3 or 4 hours, and with Peganum we're talking 6 or 7 hours, so it is twice as much. Sometimes the quality of the effect also changes, the quality of the effect caused by the X source. Why? We don't know about the mechanism of action, about this change in the effect. There are no clinical scientific effects about these pharmacological combinations. We don't know yet. In reality, harmine, harmaline, those are things that in the Amazon shamans know very well, the ayahuasca liana or the Peganum. It's not just that they have this property inhibiting MAO. We talk about the MAO inhibitors all the time, but there's something else, because they themselves have an effect, the oneirophrenic effect, as we mentioned before, and this is not well understood. It doesn't affect the serotoninergic system. Probably other systems will be affected, but this is not a lesson on neurophysiology. I mean, there are some things that are not clear yet with ayahuasca, with the mechanism of action. Not everything is clear.
Siendo que il Peganum è così tanto utilizzato, hay que conocer su.
I think the Peganum has been very used. The ayahuasca liana has a very low toxicity, and I cannot say many things because things cannot be said when talking about toxicity, but anyway, toxicity is very low. But with Peganum, we have to pay more attention, not only because it's 10 or 20 times more powerful concerning the harmine and the harmaline, but also because there are other components included. With the Peganum, we can get intoxicated, which usually with the liana does not happen. It's a question of dose and also of how to use it or not to use it. And people conducting ceremonies, the practitioners that use Peganum, for instance, as a replacement of the liana, this happens in South America, but also in other places in the world. It's happening, and it has happening for many years. They need to be very much responsible concerning what can be done. First, in Peganum seeds, there is not only harmine and harmaline, but in little doses, but there is another compound, the vasicin, which has some properties, ulceratonic properties. That's why the Peganum in the world for many years, it's being used in low quantities when giving birth. So pregnant women, if they can, they can use ayahuasca if they have problems, but with Peganum, no way. They do not have to take Peganum at all. So ceremony practitioners do need to find out about this, because otherwise we have problems in ceremonies when using these plants. Then something else, things related to diet. And when I say diet, I'm not talking about the traditional ayahuasca diet, about eggs and meat and sexual diet and so on and so forth, which is a diet which we need to respect because it has a lot of sense and a lot of meaning. But here I'm talking about just toxicologic elements of the diet. So if you navigate on the internet, you will see that there are plenty of foods that do not need to be taken before taking ayahuasca or Peganum. But there are many exaggerations, of course, also. So you need to follow these. There are 4 sources of foods. There are things that cannot be taken 48 hours before the take, and very important also, till 24 hours after the take. This is key. All the sources soja-based, and cheeses, old cheeses, and raw cheeses, and wine and beer. I'm not talking about just a cup of beer of the wine, but plenty of wine or beer, because beer and wine cannot be combined with Peganum and chicha, cahuinga, and other products on America Latina and South America in general. And then meat and fish, conserve. If they are raw, there's no problem. But if we talk about ham or smoked salmon, for instance, that can be a problem. And it's very important to respect this, because if you fail in the respect of this diet, you can have a crisis of hypertension. There are people that have been taking antidepressant drugs, chemical drugs, or even vegetal drugs. These people cannot take Peganum, and I'm not talking about 24 hours before or after, but even 1 week before and after. And some people say, but in ayahuasca is different. People were on antidepressants and nothing happened. It might be, but all of a sudden something might happen. So this is a risk going on. And with the ayahuasca, the same. When people take antidepressants, if people take antidepressants, are on antidepressants, that's because there is a particular reason for that. And with the MAO inhibitors, there can be conflicts with the ayahuasca. There can be a crisis of the serotonergic syndrome, and then something else for white people in particular that sometimes use ecstasy or amphetamines, very strong pills. It's important for these people to know more or less the same if they use these compounds, if they take ayahuasca, and in particular when Peganum is used, it has to be isolated, I mean 2-3 weeks before and after. And these just because of reason of safety, because otherwise they can be at risk of having this serotonergic syndrome. And something else, for the person being treated with antidepressants, it's important that there is, a practitioner that has advised the person to take these antidepressants, but then the shamans, the visionaries, the conductors of ceremonies, if they are not doctors themselves, they cannot have that field of knowledge of the doctors. I mean, yes, they can know something maybe about antidepressants, but it's not their particular field of knowledge, so it's not correct. There is a risk. It's something which is not of their own realm of knowledge. It's not up to them to decide when and how the patient needs to use or to take these antidepressants. Finally, good news, some good news. In scientific magazines, medical, pharmacologic magazines, studies are published, in vitro, in vivo studies, also clinical studies, that is studies about people, about men, and they are proving, they are showing very interesting properties about alkaloids. Harmala alkaloids, and there are synthetic components that are being created in order to find out how to struggle against cancer, and these have as the molecular structure the harmala alkaloids. And here we have a very particular case, which is a very interesting one, related to the ayahuasca and especially related to Peganum, because, as I was saying, there are many more components of this in the Peganum. So here we have an example from Israel, which is very interesting. Why? Because of these Peganum harmala alkaloids. When there are issues concerning ovaries, usually the oil of the Peganum seed is used topically on the skin. And then, with infrared rays, we help to permeate the hormone and the harmaline so that it has an impact on the cancer. And there is an apoptose there, that's the suicide of the tumoral cells. And this is not only, something related to just one single take or application. Because of this activity against cancer, we need the take to be taken for quite a while. And so here, this person was having this application every 3 or 4 days for a year, till the cancer disappeared. Peganum, once again, is toxic. One can be intoxicated because of the Peganum. So one person by himself or herself, if she's not a doctor, cannot use this kind of product. Doctors, practitioners know when this has to be taken under control needed to avoid any kind of intoxication. And I think this is good news anyway. And this reinforces the message about, believing or not believing about these anti-cancer products. In pharmacological studies, we understand that an ongoing exposition is needed, even daily exposition, a long time. This is what can really provide the reduction of the cancer, because apoptosis cannot be made in just one single case. It's important once again to say this now that we have Peganum in our world. And I understand that this can be positive. I mean, sometimes people do not like very much to have Peganum in our world, in this world of ayahuasca. But I do personally think that this can be something positive. Of course, some people do things wrong, and I don't think I think it's a crime, to give and to provide a substance which is not under control. But in general, we have also another problem, because the liana is being exhausted and the Peganum is being disseminated all over the world, and probably there won't be any problem of extinction of Peganum, because we are talking about perennial plants, and seeds are all over the place, and we have the Peganum in the 4 continents, in mountains, in deserts, in many places. So it's a source of MAO inhibitors. It's a source, and it's being used in medicine in the Arab world. It has been used for many, many years. And it's all over the place. So I think it positively. I think the arrival of Peganum is positive. But it's important to know how to use it. I mean, information is key. We need to avoid problems in this great world of ours. It's not only great because we have many problems, but I like to think positive. So we have this great world of ceremonies and we need to keep them. Thank you very much.